The Book of Five Rings, Chapter 1, Earth. No man is invincible, and therefore no man can fully understand that which would make him invincible. Even with complete and thorough study, there is always the possibility of being defeated, and although one may be expert in a particular form, mastery is something a man never stops seeking to attain. It is doubtful that anyone truly understands the real way of strategy, much less truly lives it. Yet military leaders must have some understanding of strategy, and they must pass it on to their warriors, regardless of the limitations of their own understanding. There is no one way to salvation. Whatever the manner in which a man may proceed, all forms and variations are governed by the eternal intelligence of the universe that enables a man to approach perfection. It may be in the arts of music and painting, or it may be in commerce, law, or medicine. It may be in the study of war, or the study of peace. Each is as important as any other. Spiritual enlightenment through religious meditation such as Zen or in any other way is as viable and functional as any way. Certainly in the way of the sword or the fist, a person should study as they see fit. A warrior should have an understanding of the peaceful arts as well as the killing arts. This is a twofold way. If a man chooses a certain way and seems to have no particular talent for this way, he can still become a master if he so chooses. By keeping at a particular form of study, a man can attain perfection either in this life or the next, if a next life is believed in. The warrior, however, understands that the end result of any study is a kind of death, sublime, not necessarily physical, before the attainment of perfection. Many different types of people have been known to die for either the right reasons or the wrong reasons. The only shame in dying incorrectly is to die a stupid and meaningless death. To die as a warrior means to have crossed swords and either won or lost without any consideration for winning or losing. There's just not enough time, and generally there is not enough strength in the resolve of any man to do otherwise. In all accomplishments of war, the warrior understands that the only real measure of his ability lies in being able to beat men in fights regardless of their nature. Failure in any other failure in any other area is not to be construed as a true test of a warrior's mettle. The true virtue of strategy is in allowing us to overcome all odds in daily life, and in helping us attain the closest state we can to being one with the supreme power before going into battle. The development of warrior consciousness is an ongoing thing. Each new experience continually leads to new challenges. The way cannot be learned through frivolous contests in which the outcome is for the name of a school or a large trophy. It can only be realized where physical death is a reality. The way of strategy. The way is a specific and determinedly deliberate methodology. The ancient masters must be studied constantly without respite, even when the practitioner thinks he has grasped the knowledge. It is important to realize that technique is not the end of an art. Those good in technique, regardless of the art they pursue, are not necessarily able to teach the true meaning of an art. Beginning students, who do not know this and who think that they are being brought to the threshold of understanding, are not to blame, so much as those who teach without understanding the inner and outer worlds of the art of which they profess to be masters. It is useless for people who look good in play competition to think in terms of being masters. They appear to understand, and as a result, permit their own self-importance to convince them that they are bearers of the truth. Only through a constant search from within, based on one's own lifestyle, can the truth be known. It is absolutely a personal thing. Commercialism does nothing to enhance the reality of truth, although it can lead one to the start of the path. A man cannot understand the perfection and imperfections of his chosen art if he cannot see the value in other arts. Following rules only permits development up to a point in technique. To advance further, the student and artist must learn and seek other knowledge. It makes sense to study other arts as well as those of strategy. Who has not learned something more about themselves by watching the activities of others? To learn the sword, study the guitar. To learn the fist, study commerce. To only study the sword will make you narrow-minded and will keep you from growing outward. Everything is for sale, including men's souls. A man cannot understand the art he is studying if he only looks for the end result without taking the time to delve deeply into the reasoning of the study. There is no purpose in trying to determine whether one is better than another. If anything is anything, then everything is everything. Do not confuse profit with profitability. To sell yourself based on the design of your school symbol is unfair to students and is moreover moronic because it fools the unknowing into thinking that skill is based on superficiality. Besides, it's bad karma and it'll come back to haunt you. You cannot fool with the spirit of the thing itself. It is a far greater wisdom than man can ever understand. In our society, there are 4 classes of people. Each fulfills appropriate functions and each is able to attain levels of perfection according to its own means. The specific ranks of the classes in order of their importance to the society are 1. The samurai, 2. The farmers, 3. The artisans, and finally 4. The merchants. Each is respected and disrespected equally by the other classes. The samurai are warriors and live a higher ideal. The study of their weapons is their prime motivation. Farmers are next because they provide the food needed for the masses. Artisans are the craftsmen and makers of weapons and other products. Merchants are a ridiculed class because they produce nothing except profit from the work of others. Yet it must be understood that each has a viable and functional part within the structure of society, and that even though, for example, the warrior class may despise the merchant class, we are all too aware of the need for them to maintain the economy. Money must be made to pay the army. Comparing the way of the craftsman to the strategy of a warrior. It is important to understand what the goal of an art is. Once that is understood, it is easy to pursue the spirit of it. To study carpentry, you study the correlation of materials, and so I can compare the way of the warrior to the way of the craftsman. To study the sword, you study war, weapons, and men. To study craftsmanship, you study the project, the tools, and men. You will succeed or fail in either one depending on your attitude towards the spirit of the thing. There can be no let up to your study, regardless of the path you choose. Even though you may have mastered a particular level, you must search constantly for still more understanding of your chosen art. If there is no discipline, how can there be a true realization of an ideal? How can a man be trusted to perform in society if he does not understand what society needs? To act in harmony with the environment of where you are, you must understand the need for certain rules. If you do not, then you will not be able to control others. If you cannot control others, then how can you expect to attain perfection in your own ideal? It is essential for the leader to know the rules of the game. Which rules work? Which rules do not work? Which rules can be changed to suit a particular need? Which rules, when changed, will create additional problems and which will not? Craftsmen are familiar with the quality of the materials they use in their work. A man must not assume that another man's uniform or armament is an indication of his strength. Many warriors have always relied on the look of their armor to intimidate the enemy. Do not assume that what appear to be finely crafted goods will hold up under use. The truth is that strength lies in the interior of the warrior, in his heart, his mind, and his spirit. The same applies to weapons. An excellently crafted weapon is incapable of acting on its own accord. It must be wielded. The extent to which a weapon is well crafted is based solely on the ability of the craftsman. The strengths and weaknesses of the materials used must be understood by the craftsman. A merchant, on the other hand, must rely solely on his ability to manipulate others into believing that his goods are the best. That is the way of the merchant. The farmer knows when his produce is good and when it is inferior. That is the way of the farmer. The warrior knows in his heart when he is correct in action and when he is issuing false bravado. All men are the same, except for their belief in their own selves, regardless of what others may think of them. The supervisor on a construction job must assign tasks to his men according to their known abilities. Who is good at what specific aspect of the project? Who can lay floors? Who can tile the roof? Who can connect the drainage system? Should this not also be true for warriors? The warrior leader must understand himself before he can understand the realities of commanding others to do his bidding, especially when teaching is involved. Only when each soldier has been observed can the commander know which warrior will be able to perform a specific act. Otherwise, only chaos can result. The supervisor of a job should circulate among his men to appraise their strengths and weaknesses. He must praise them where they earn praise and admonish them where they do not fulfill the requirements of the job. But he must praise and admonish equally, or there will be a loss of morale, and the job may not be finished correctly. Likewise, a commander must walk among his men if he is to expect a certain level of performance. If he is unaware of the skills of each warrior, how can he know to whom to assign tasks. The commander, this is a virtue of strategy. Why would a commander want a spearman to join the line of archers? Even if there is tremendous spirit on the part of the spearman, with no experience with the bow, his best efforts can only be mediocre. What the way of strategy is. A warrior is responsible for his own weapons just as a craftsman is responsible for his own tools. It is simply not possible to get good results without the necessary respect for one's tools or one's weapons. Time must be devoted to training, practicing, and maintaining one's tools or weapons, however gifted a man may be. Each aspect of the craft must be examined over and over again without regard for the time and energy spent, whether physically or mentally. The spirit of the thing is what will guide a man to his own greatness. There is no way that can be approached and petitioned for immediate gratification. The universe does not work that way. How could it, and at the same time, expect any perfection to develop? If you permit the spirit to permeate your being, the spirit will... Oh my god. Let me try that paragraph over. The universe does not work that way. How could it, and at the same time, expect any perfection to develop? If you permit the spirit to permeate your being, the spirit will permeate through you by permitting you to be its instrument. When the warrior becomes skilled and understands his chosen weapons, when he cares for them with a sense of oneness, knowing that they are used to defeat enemies, he can be self-assured as a warrior. He can then become a commander. A craftsman must likewise understand the spirit of his tools. He must care for them as for his very own self. Only then can he meld with them to become the end product. That is what is meant by the sword being the soul of the samurai. A warrior must be proficient in all the tools of his trade. He should understand the functions of all weapons and the functions of all military regimentation. A lancer should understand the sword. A kempoist should understand jujitsu technique. And a doctor should know carpentry. How else could they meet the unexpected without knowing how the opposition's weapons work? It is also suggested that the warrior familiarize himself with the actual workings of other weapons. In this way, a foreign attack will not overwhelm him with its technique, even if it has never been encountered before. Constant study of every aspect of the warrior's craft is essential to understanding the true value of one's particular skills. This is what the ancients meant when they said to think deeply about things. This is another way to grow in your skills. For example, what would your reaction be if you were studying one craft of warriorness and then found that you truly enjoyed working with a different weapon? Contemplate the reality of this. Do not make the mistake of thinking that it is sufficient to finish one section of a job without having planned its continuation. If you are going to construct a desk, you must plan for drawers, knobs, etc. If not, the work may appear to be aesthetically pleasing, but in reality will be disharmonious with the universe. Masters plan for contingency even when it appears that they are only improvising. The presentation of an idea, apparently improvised, is only valid if there has been adequate study and preparation on the part of the teacher, who can then deliver the information in the proper sequences. A master achieves the way by being devoted to the art, while the art itself reveals its true identity to a warrior only when the spirit of the thing itself feels comfortable with the warrior as a vehicle for its own expression. If you wish to learn my way of strategy, you must do sufficient research and study. Doing sufficient research means that you must devote yourself as much as possible to the study of these ideas, to the degree with which you feel that you will have accomplished that which you wanted to accomplish. The level of commitment that you give to it will indicate to it what to reveal of itself to you. I knew what I was going to do when I began this book, and my steadfast devotion permitted the spirit of the thing itself to produce the results. The meaning of the 5 parts of this book of strategy. The name of this book is 5 Rings. Buddhist teachings contain the 5 elements of the universe: earth, water, fire, wind, and no-thingness. In the book of Earth, the strategy of my school is explained. You are being told the reasons for my writings as well as their structure. You must not depend on understanding your art only by studying the one art with which you are involved. It is difficult to understand the universe if you study only one planet. One must be aware of all the arts by becoming familiar with many of them, as part of one's complete devotion to one of them. Endeavor to know all things. Though you cannot ever do this, you will become more aware of the world around you, an essential strategy if you choose to be a warrior. In the Book of Water, I explain that water fills all shapes and eventually wears down any form of captivity. I clearly explain what my Ichi school proposes for the study of strategy. There are many ways of understanding simple things, but generally the opposite is true for difficult ideas. Study what I say with the desire to understand my way of strategy. When you have mastered the basics of sword fighting, you will be able to beat one man or many men. The result would be the same if you were fighting a countless horde, so long as your strength remained with you. The amount of strength you have depends upon the training and practice you've put into your art. It is important to remember that all things can only be built from the ground up and in one stage at a time. Spirit is the thing that must be concentrated upon. To know 10,000 things, know one well. It is difficult to understand these ideas broadly through the use of words. The realities are mostly intuitive. The proper attitude of spirit must be constantly studied. The Book of Water explains the specifics and particulars of my Ichi school. The Book of Fire is about fighting. When a man fights in real combat, his spirit becomes fierce. There is a time for the spirit to be large and a time for the spirit to be small. In order to be able to determine the possible outcomes of combat situations, you must constantly maintain the proper attitude by practicing diligently. You can only fight the way you practice. By maintaining the proper attitude, you will always practice diligently with the proper spirit, and ensure your ability to become that much stronger. Through practice, you will be able to properly maintain yourself at all times. It is hard to perceive small movements in an enemy, but it is easy to see large movements in many men. When studying the art of strategy, it is necessary to practice day and night. I cannot stress this enough. You will come to realize what I am saying as the way to strategy. Your normal life must be a life of strategy. Full combat in battle is explained in this book. Your spirit must remain unchanged as long as you study, as long as you live the warrior life. The Book of Wind concerns itself with the strategies and teachings of other schools and the traditions of the past. There are obvious differences, and there are differences that are not so easy to ascertain. One must be careful not to study traditional methods that diverge from the true teaching of the path. I make the differences very clear and easy to understand. A slight error in judgment while at sea can throw you miles off course. You must constantly study your way to ensure you do not lose your way. It is very easy to be sidetracked from the direct method. You must understand what I am talking about when the differences between the Ichi school and others are explained. It is not wrong to think that methods that teach only sword fighting are incorrect, but the advantage of my Ichi school's style of sword fighting lies in its mental and physical technique. Let me read that again. It is not wrong to think that methods that teach only sword fighting are incorrect, but the advantage of my Ichi school's style of sword fighting lies in its mental and physical technique. To learn technique is essential. However, strategic thinking has its own principles, and they can be applied to anything that has to do with war and combat. In this way, the Ichi school breaks from traditional teaching. It is easy to understand the first 4 books of the 5 rings. Introductory remarks concerning the outline of the 5 books should be understood upon simple review. Nothing profound is revealed in the introduction. The basic idea of the way of strategy is the attitude of being or not being, and will be expanded upon. However, in the Book of No Thingness, you will learn that the way of strategy is also the way of nature, and that there is no difference except for what we ourselves conceive or misconceive as truth. When you understand the way of strategy, you will be able to hit a man without a thought in a completely natural manner. There is a sound approach to understanding the entire subject. The Book of No Thingness is also the shortest of the written tracts, and it is at the same time both simple and difficult to comprehend. Why I call my school One Way, Two Swords. It is common for a warrior to carry 2 swords. One is a long sword, and the other is a short sword. The names for the swords varies from place to place and time to time. My school teaches the proper use of both swords in combat, even though a warrior can rely on either one or the other. Spears, lances, bows with arrows are generally used out of doors, as is the sword. Swords are used indoors and outdoors, but mainly for close combat. You must be able to wield the swords in any situation. The comparison between halberds, spears, bows, and arrows is evident, and makes perfect sense in the context of a combat situation. The sword is easier to deal with regardless of the terrain where you happen to be fighting. At the beginning of training, lances, spears, and other weapons are certain to prove difficult, especially if you have never had experience with them. But in time, all things work to your advantage when you pursue them with an open heart. I insist that my students start their training with both swords in either hand. In a combat situation, you must understand how to make complete use of your weapons. Any other reasoning is foolish. If you are going to die in battle, then you should do so with the utmost respectability and dignity. It is a terrible shame to die in battle with your sword undrawn, or yourself unable to use it correctly. Because my system employs both swords, a warrior must hold the sword in one hand. It is hard to use a sword correctly when it is held with both hands. You are also limited to the use of one sword when the other sword remains passive. A drawn weapon is a killing device, and must be used as such. It is not for play. Whatever your determination or willpower, it is foolish to try to change the nature of things. Things work the way they do because that is the way of things. The warrior should fully understand the nature of the weapon he is using. The long sword is used in a broad manner, and the short sword for in-close combat. Your choice of weapons does not make much difference if you understand their nature. You must also understand the purpose of their existence as well. Once this is done, you will be able to wield any weapon that you have trained with if you have trained with all your heart. The main idea of my way of strategy is to win. There is nothing else. The following is a philosophical truth. One thing does one thing. Two things do four things. Think this through. If you are fighting a crowd or controlling a group, it is better to use two swords than one. It is very hard to explain these ideas in detail because of their intuitive nature. Once you have understood the depth of the thing you are studying, the spirit of all things will reveal itself to you. To master the longsword is to be a master of strategy in my school. As I have mentioned before, the sword has long been called the soul of the warrior. There is a closeness between the warrior and his weapon. All weapons are warrior's equipment and a part of strategy. When a warrior is master of the longsword, he can rule the world. He can certainly beat 10 men or more in combat. To further illustrate my point, consider the unarmed man as being even closer to the ideal because no weapon other than empty hands is used. To go still further, consider the attitude of thing, no thing, an attitude which must not be confused with the concept of nothing, which is still something by definition. The sword is a physical object and is feared by most men. Warriors are not. The craft of the warrior and his way is the only thing that deals directly with physical living and physical dying. Other arts do not. To understand the universe, one must be in accord with the truths of other matters in order to understand more deeply the conviction needed to pursue the way of the warrior. Other ways do not deal with life and death. They deal with ideas that may or may not be acceptable to others. There is a significant difference between beating a man intellectually and physically taking his life. We live in a physical world and are governed much more by the things that can affect us physically than by psychological browbeating. The advantage of using weapons in strategy. Each weapon has its own spirit. Each weapon must be used in its proper place in order to be effective and enable the handler of the weapon to take advantage of its properties. The ultimate weapon is thing no thing. In addition to physical weapons, consider the use of empty hands to be the ultimate physical weapon. Now consider the use of empty mind. You must study with the idea in mind of being able to function in any situation with any weapon. If you study hard and understand the properties of all weapons, they may be used effectively in any situation. Attack weapons like the spear and the bow are good at the onset of an attack, but become virtually useless when involved with up-close combat. This does not mean that the bow is entirely useless. Remember, Remember to read with understanding and to keep in mind the weapons that are used in warfare. As new weapons are developed, they should also be studied with the proper intent of the warrior, which is to master strategy. The gun is a formidable weapon, and has no equal at the beginning of an onslaught, but it becomes useless in combat at close quarters because of the difficulty reloading. The lance and spear must be used at a distance, and the bow is of no use in close combat either. Consider the times you are living in, and the weapons available to you. As times change, and new weapons are made available to you, you must continue to study the nature of these weapons and learn to work with them in learning my strategy. The weapon is a tool to be used efficiently and effectively, otherwise it will be of little value, even in the hands of a master. With the longsword or with empty hands, the stance should be strong, the cuts, strikes, punches, and kicks strong, and the spirit unyielding in the face of battle. This will depend on the amount of heart you have put into your training and practice. Weapons may have decorations on them to enhance the spirit of the warrior, but they should primarily be built for durability. It is dangerous for a warrior to know only one thing. It will eventually create short-sightedness and limit the possibilities for additional growth. What is the sense of knowing a thing to such a degree that you become oblivious to other things? If you constantly disregard the possibilities of other methods and tools, then you become short-sighted and may in fact lose the advantage of your own strength. That is why a warrior must learn the techniques of other schools and apply that information to the system being studied here. Why timing is important in strategy. There are good times and there are bad times for everything. When you understand timing, then you also understand rhythm. Timing and rhythm, they are one and the same thing, yet they are different. To understand them both as one, you must understand them individually. It is absolutely essential to understand the timing of universal harmony as well. Timing can be altered. Rhythm can be altered. They can be altered individually or in unison. You must understand that in order to restructure time, you should have a complete understanding and realization of the universe, or else your own substance will be infected with error, and you will not be able to perform properly in battles of any type. I cannot stress enough that this comes with constant practice. Understanding timing and rhythm is essential to my strategy. You should always train with timing and rhythm uppermost in your mind, and realize that there are different types of timing and different types of rhythm. Understand them well, and you will understand my way of strategy. Endnotes to the Book of Earth. It must be understood that training is never completed. When the warrior thinks that training is over, he will find that the spirit of the thing itself he has been studying will elude him and fail to provide him with any future revelations. He must never stop training. In this way, the spirit of the warrior will continue to grow. The way of the warrior is a way of life, and can never be construed as a hobby unless you are seeking only to impress others with your technique. You must never stop studying the written passages of masters relating to the arts you have chosen to practice, nor should you stop studying other arts that the warrior studies to broaden his horizons. The heart is essential in helping the intellect to understand the spirit. If you do not have a map in unfamiliar territory, how can you hope to get to where you want to go without difficulty? Even if you have directions, you may still have to negotiate roadblocks along the way. Likewise, if you do not set your mind and heart on the required principles, how can you ever hope to understand what it is you are trying to accomplish? It is important for the warrior to constantly meditate upon these things. 1. Think honestly within yourself in your dealings with all men. 2. Constant training is the only way to learn strategy. 3. Become familiar with every art you come across. 4. Understand the way of other disciplines. 5. Know the difference between right and wrong in the matters of men. 6. Strive for inner judgment and an understanding of everything. 7. See that which cannot be seen. 8. Overlook nothing, regardless of its insignificance. 9. Do not waste time idling or thinking after you have set your goals. The 9 basic attitudes I have listed are essential for freeing your spirit from negative thoughts that would interfere with your journey. They must be thought about constantly. You must take them into your heart. Once you have accepted the need to study these attitudes, you can proceed with deliberateness, diligence, and comfort. You will be able to beat many men just by looking them in the eye. They will realize that you are a formidable opponent and will not have the heart to attack. Remember timing. Do not forget harmony with the universe and self. Remember that continuous study is essential for approaching perfection in a chosen art. Although some people may appear to be there, they too must continually deal with change, based on the rise and fall of timing and rhythm. However, through devotion to the way of your art, you can remove yourself from the general mass of people and be able to concentrate more effectively on your chosen way. It is also essential to remember the need to function in society, good or bad, and that in order for your way to be successful, you must interact with society. If you wish to control others, you must first control yourself. That is why it is necessary to study continuously. This is the essence of my strategy. So ends the Book of Earth.